John 18:28-32 presents a striking contrast between religious anxiety and the calm certainty of Jesus. The leaders bring him from Caiaphas to the Roman governor early in the morning, yet they refuse to enter the Gentile headquarters so they will not become ceremonially defiled before eating the Passover. Their concern for outward purity stands in tension with their participation in delivering the innocent Son of God to death. John intentionally highlights this irony. The very one who fulfills the Passover is standing before them, yet they remain occupied with ritual boundaries instead of recognizing the lamb sent to take away sin. Pilate comes outside to question them, asking what accusation they bring against Jesus. Their answer reveals the weakness of their case. If he were not an evildoer, we would not have delivered him up to you. They avoid presenting clear evidence because their opposition to Jesus is rooted more in threatened authority and unbelief than in genuine justice. The religious system had become deeply invested in preserving its own structure, and Jesus exposed the emptiness of confidence in external performance. Throughout John's Gospel, Christ reveals that life, righteousness, and acceptance with God are found in him rather than in temple-centered distinctions and religious striving. Pilate initially tells them to judge Jesus according to their own law, but they reply that they do not have authority to put anyone to death. John then explains that this fulfilled what Jesus had spoken concerning the manner of his death. Earlier, Jesus said he would be lifted up, pointing to crucifixion rather than execution by stoning. Even in the midst of political maneuvering and human hostility, the death of Christ unfolds according to divine purpose. Nothing is accidental. The cross is not a tragic interruption of God's plan. It is the very center of redemption. This passage also anticipates the passing away of the old covenant order that had rejected its Messiah. The Jewish leadership still operated within the structures of temple ritual and ceremonial separation. Yet those structures were already approaching their end because their fulfillment had arrived in Christ. Within that generation, the temple system would be removed, confirming that God's dwelling was no longer centered in stone buildings and sacrificial rituals, but in the risen Christ and his people. John's gospel repeatedly points away from shadows towards substance. Jesus is the true temple, the true Passover, and the true meeting place between God and humanity. The scene therefore becomes more than a legal hearing. It is the exposure of the inadequacy of the old religious order when confronted with the fullness of God's grace revealed in Christ. Those who clung to outward purity missed the one who alone could truly cleanse the conscience. Jesus stood condemned by men so that sinners could stand accepted before God. His kingdom would not be established through political revolt or earthly force, but through his self-giving death and victorious resurrection. John 18, verse 28-32, invites believers to rest in what Christ has accomplished rather than an external religious performance. The passage reminds us that righteousness is not found in ceremonial observance, institutional identity, or human effort. It is found completely in the finished work of Jesus, the true Passover lamb, whose death brought an end to the old shadows and opened the way into lasting fellowship with God.